Working? Yeah. All right. So I'm very happy today to welcome you here once again to our now almost famous Pingle XT networking series, number 4. So the goal of these networking series is really to bring knowledge and awareness for people that are already in the industry, but also for people that are wanting to come to join our big family in the games industry. So um, we every time that we do these networking series, we rely on one of our advisors within Pingle. This time around is Kishirani, who has gathered an awesome panel once again to discuss games versus tech. Pingle Studio is a Ukrainian-based company with, as you saw in the little video, with more than 400 people now and growing steadily. I hope that by the end of this session, you will have gained some knowledge and awareness about what it takes to be actually in the gaming industry and the challenges that we have to face every single day when it comes to games versus tech. Kish, without further ado, it's your turn now.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Keshirani. I'm going to be moderating this panel. And I've got this wonderful panelist here who, as they're about to introduce themselves, I'll just give you a bit of the sequence we'll go on this. The topic is tech versus game, but we don't have some technology having a KO fight with the design or so, despite the topic saying tech versus game, which would have been a lot cooler, I think. But it's basically technology constraints which are set not deliberately, but just by sheer platforms where they are in their life cycle. So, as well as software limitations of where things are. And as this amazing designers who are going to introduce themselves will tell you how they work around that. And I think all of us hopefully unanimously agree that tech constraints are a good thing for any creative person because then you know where the canvas ends and where you have to stop. Otherwise, you'll just carry on innovating and don't know when to finish your artwork or music or whatever else, or a television series or a movie needs to be 1.5 hours long. Cinema put that constraints, etc. And we've got very, very similar in the video games industry where we've had this constraint. So I got this wonderful panel of hopefully creative and designers, but I'll be surprised because I don't know their roots into the games and what they were before or so. So I'm as curious as you in their journey to where they've got to at these wonderful companies. And then we'll take it from there. And I want to start towards the end on see if we can talk about the future consoles or technology or way things going. One emphasis I'll make, and we've got these wonderful individuals, as you can see from the names, working for large corporations or so, but they're going to be speaking here as themselves, as their wonderful talent they are. So we're not going to be platform specific. We're not going to be game specific or any title specific, except if they want to talk about and it's just a good example or so. I've not guided them any further than that, except for they have the freedom to talk about whatever else. So I think a lot of times they may pick their favorite game, and there are times they might be picking a game they're working on. But I want to emphasize, purely because you're going to be taking part in this as well, that when you ask questions or so, please keep them very general to the talent we've got here, as opposed to the company they're working at, if you see what I mean. Well, I'll keep reminding you, so don't worry about that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself a bit as well, but I'll let my panelists, in terms of where I came from and where I've ended up and why I've ended up on this stage, I guess. But let's start from Jack on the further end, and we'll just go this way. Love to introduce yourself, first of all, but I would love also your journey into the video games industry and why you ended up on this stage.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, I'm Jack, senior level designer at PlayStation London Studio. Been in the industry now like 6, 7, maybe even 8 years now from memory. Worked at a bunch of different studios in that time, including TT Games, Supermassive, Sumo as well. I'm a level designer now, but I've worked in the different roles across design. So I've done some cinematic stuff, done some combat. But level design's kind of my bread and butter that I always end up kind of going back to as a designer. Yeah, my kind of story, like a lot of people, I think, of my generation, went through the kind of college and university route. Went to that and did all that kind of stuff. And then I was like, I need to find a job. I knew someone who was in QA at the time. So I was like, okay, like I'll go for that. And then I'm in the industry, so to speak, and I'll figure the stuff out later. And then there happened to be like an internal design secondment at one of the studios I was at. And I applied for that, managed to land that job, and then kind of started in my junior role from there. Promoted, and then I kind of started, looking around for different studios, get some more experience. That took me to Supermassive. Was there for a year or two, and then I went back to TT Games, where I did a few bits there. Primarily, big project there was the Star Wars, the Skywalker saga. So it was a really huge, ambitious Lego title that took like episode 1 to 9 of the films and made one game out of it. I also had a stint in R&D, which I can probably get into a bit later on, which is a very different role compared to working in like an actual like normal studio environment. And then after that, I went to Sumo, like I mentioned as well. I was only there a short time, and then I ended up at PlayStation, where I'm at now, where we're currently building a PS5 game from the ground up. So that was a really brief way through my journey, but I can get into other bits as we go on, I guess. But yeah. That's me.
Fantastic. And just if you're observant enough, PlayStation hasn't changed their name. That's a typo. So
yeah. That wasn't me, by the way.
Charlie.
Yeah, cheers, Kish. I'm Charlie. I'm a creative director at Creative Assembly on the Hyenas project. So I've been in the industry about 26 years now. I did product design at university. We didn't have any games design courses back then, so I did product design. And I was going to be a product designer, but I left and I thought, I really don't want to be a product designer. I want to be in games. And I found that course really helped me. It taught me user-centric design. It taught me a design process. It taught me how to write and read briefs. It taught me how to deal with criticism as well. It's quite harsh. You get quite harsh critiques on art courses. So I found that put me in really good stead, but not right at that time. So I left with a portfolio that was to get into a product design course. And I thought, well, I want to get into games. So I went to a few games companies and they just looked at me blankly. And I realized that the way in was to make it really easy for your interviewer, give them exactly what they want to see, make their job really easy. So I was very lucky to get a job back then, which was a very boring job, but it was converting flight training manuals to CD-ROM. Right, so all we were doing was drawing lots of planes and cockpits and crashes, made me terrified of flying for about a decade. But I used that time to put together a portfolio in my spare time, trying to sort of like think of game designs that I could create art for. And I did that for 2 years, put together a portfolio, and got my first job at IDOS back in '96. And then from IDOS, stayed there for a few years. We set up our own company, Black Cactus. We did a few games, I did a short stint, and I started as an artist. But I was very chatty and I liked the design problems. They seemed to be the interesting problems. So I'd talk a lot in the studio about that, and I kind of transitioned to a more designy role, doing a lot of level design. We started our own company, Black Cactus, where I became lead designer. Did a stint at Frontier. I went to Rockstar. I was with Rockstar for 10 years, which was a really great experience. And I left there in 2016 to join Creative Assembly as a design director, and I've been there since then.
Fantastic. Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon. I started my career at Ubisoft Reflections back in, I think, 2005. I'd graduated uni about 8 months before or so. I'd finished a master's in intelligent systems. I'd been looking for all kinds of roles in stuff related to big data. And back in 2005, AI, big data was a really nascent kind of industry. There wasn't much there, and so I couldn't find any work. I was kind of overqualified for things or underexperienced for things. I randomly saw an advert for Reflections and just thought, I might as well give this a shot. And it changed my life, really. I've been playing games since I was a kid, like I think probably everyone in this room. So when I saw that and got, thought I might have the chance, so, it was life-changing, really. But I think one of the things for me, when I finished uni, they gave us this advice to put on your CV a picture of yourself. I'm not sure that's good advice, but
Was it that one? Or
actually, no, it's not that one. I'm not quite sure who he is, but that might have helped me get a job too. But I was drunk in the pub, like in my first year of working there, and our manager, Craig Lawson, equally drunk, told me I'd stuck in his head because I'd look much taller in my photo. And I do think that's been a big thing for me getting into the industry, has just been random chance. So I'm not the best person to give advice on that. But moving past that, I was a mission scripter, so designers would give us a design for a mission in driver parallel lines. The idea was they'd give you player starts here, player ends there, this is the route, this is where the bad guys go, and we'd just script it. Then I became lead mission scripter on Driver San Francisco, and during that, I evolved the team into being level designers. The idea was to actually let them design the work they were implementing and give them much more creative freedom. A big difference. I moved into a technical design role, worked on Watch Dogs, then Tom Clancy's The Division, some DLC for that, The Division 2, DLC for that. And then I was kind of at a point where I could start work on a new undisclosed project, which might be 5 or 6 years, or move and see another company. And after 16 years in one place, I thought it's maybe now or never. So I moved to Hangar 13 in lockdown 2020, where I'm now a studio design director, responsible for the whole design discipline and making sure everyone's got good career growth, looking at best practices, things like that. So it's a big change for me over the years.
No alcohol involved in getting the job at Hangar 13.
No, I got the job sober,
Oh,
and I've been sober for the last few years as well. So,
and so, as more observant has pointed out, that's not a photo of Simon. We used Midjourney and ChatGPT, and that's what it came up with. So maybe,
needs better reference material.
Jess.
Oh, hi,
last
I'm
but
Jess.
least.
I am a senior technical designer at Rare, working on Everwild. My journey actually starts really early. So my games journey starts when I was 4. So my dad was actually a games programmer. So I'm second generation games. Ooh. And he was studying at Abertay University on the first year that they did their computer games programming course. So I've been running around the uni since I was like 4. Funnily enough, I actually met the head of games at that point, and he then retired in the year that I went to and finished Abertay University as well. I went there some years later and studied computer art. So my background was in art and animation. My first job was a pixel artist for 4J Studios, working on Minecraft. From there, then I went and did a lot of kind of competitions and kind of different things when I was at university, and I got to come to lots of conferences and things. And I didn't know it at the time, but there was one specific conference at EGX where we got to showcase our game as part of a student showcase competition. And I met 2 of my future bosses that day. And I did not know that they were going to hire me, obviously, at that point. But looking back, I can say I have met every single one of my bosses before they've hired me. So if you're here today, woo, who knows where you're going to be in the future. So I started, like I said, I started at 4J. I then moved across to Epic Games, where I did 2 years of community management for Unreal Engine. So I used to work with all of the studios and teams across Europe in any way, shape, or form that they needed. It was everything from kind of biz dev, marketing, PR support, across to like any kind of technical support they needed, just the whole shebang. Really amazing, really great time. Got to meet loads of people, actually seeing some of the studios that I worked with here today, showcasing their games as well, which has been really, really good. But during that, I was like, oh, I kind of miss making games myself as well. Like, you guys are all doing really awesome stuff, and I'm really inspired. And it was from there that I then made the jump to Rare. And I started in there as a technical designer. I think I was one of the first technical designers they had there. And then kind of been moving on through there since.
Excellent. Right. And I like doing my intro and then going unconventionally as a moderator. I should be doing my intro first, purely because my journey was pretty much into the video games, almost the path which you see in a textbook, and life never works out in a textbook. So I like going right at the end. So I did my first degree as, by the way, I was born in Kenya, started programming on a BBCB because Dad came to Britain and that's like educational computer. So I got it at the age of like 12 or something like that, and I just started programming. And since then, I just knew I wanted to do programming. And coming from Indian parents that wanted me to be an architect or get a real job scenario. So, but it's just something I wanted to do. So I ended up doing. I wanted to do a computer science degree, and this was way back in 1991. I'm that old. So I wanted to do a computer science degree, but the teachers, mentors, anybody who was influencing me in my life at that stage said, we don't not sure where this computer science thing will go, so do a mathematics and computer science degree just in case. So I did a mathematics and computer science degree, not out of choice, but I was told this is the way forward. It's funny, I did it at Goldsmiths College, University of London, and that faculty was mathematics faculty offering computer science. If you go to Goldsmiths College right now, it's a computer science faculty with offering option as a mathematics module. How the world is changing in 35 years. So after that, I ended up getting a very, very well-paid job in London as a database programmer. And I was going to kill myself. I could close my eyes and program, and it was just so uninnovative. And so, but I really, really wanted to go into the movie special effects. And I can say even now that video games industry was my second choice, which led me to, let me just stand out a bit more, and let's do a computer science master's. So I did a computer science master's at Edinburgh University, and I was basically, while I was doing my degree, 4G Studio prior to that was Viz Interactive, which ended up interviewing me, and I was hired as a programmer number 2 in Dundee, being told that it's going to be moved to Edinburgh. And Viz Interactive was a spin-off from DMA Designs. Everything began in, so anyway, told my dad and everybody, I'm not coming back to London. I've got a job in Scotland. And so I remained straight after my graduation. And since then, that is 27 years ago this year. So I've been in mainly technical leadership roles in exciting companies like THQ, Acclaim, and then transitioned to publishers, and started off with BBC Multimedia. So worked on Bob the Builder. If you're hopefully all young enough and played that game back then, it sold millions, but minimum effort in terms of technology or anything of work which requires me to learn. And then after that, I transitioned into Microsoft. So I ended up at Microsoft working on DirectX game as I think my job title was tech evangelist. And they said we could call ourselves Evangineers, but just didn't. I thought it was a bit lame. So, but we could pick our title if I want, which is, I think, super cool as well. That if a company lets you pick your title, then why not? And then after that, I ended up at Sony PlayStation, and I was 8 years stretch. And just giving all the background of where I've been, because there are a couple of stories I want to use from that time as I plant discussion items to the panelists as well. And also, I like running panels where you learn something which is more anecdotal and throwaway experience as opposed to something you can read online in an article or something of that. So anyway, I ended up at PlayStation as head of developed services at the launch of PlayStation 3. So pretty much was involved from day one as a concept on PlayStation Vita, PlayStation 4, PSVR, and just about when PlayStation 5 was about to be in concept, that's when they gave me a lot of money to leave. They made my position redundant. And since then, I've been self-employed, and I've worked with companies I like working with, and so also with the Pingle Studios, I'm working as an advisor. But my day job, I'm working on with Kiss Publishing, which is listed there, which is working on John Hare's Sociable Soccer. And big there is abbreviation for Baymin Games. It's just when I left Sony, I started, well, basically the person, David Smith, who founded Women in Games, gathered all the underrepresented ethnicity in the video games industry and gathered around a table at Yuki and said, do we need similar to Women in Games, organization for underrepresented ethnicity? And everybody around the table who'd been at least 10, 15 years in the video games industry or so, all underrepresented ethnicity said, there isn't one, and including myself. And that really hit me in the sense that we always in life assume if you're doing something or if something is different or hard, I'm sure somebody else is going to do it. And I think at that point was such a big change, and that's already me 25 years in my career to have a wake-up call that none of these organizations and anything looking about which is just not the norm to make a difference, somebody has to start it. So I took the voluntary position of becoming the founding chair of BAME Games, and here we are 6 years on, and I'm still the chair of BAME Games. It's still a grassroots organization, and if anybody else wants to take over the role, I'll be more than happy to. There we are. So that is our intro and getting started, and I thought it would be great to give you that context because I want to start with a bit of a, again, anecdotal story on a PlayStation 4 as it was being designed. Being head of developer services, I had I said the privilege and the honor to accompany the chief architect and of chief hardware and software architect with all across European studios on what do you want PlayStation 4 to be. And typically, if anybody should be surprising because it's kept secret, but it shouldn't be. But it's usually about 2 years before the platform is announced to developers, not to the public. So you'd start hearing codename Morpheus and stuff like that, and it's always kept a top secret. But it's 2 years before then we go out to developers and mainly worldwide studios, which is an internal studio like Jack and his team would have been actually probably engineers who had been disclosed first. It's always a top secret. Even within Sony, you're not allowed to talk about that. So anyway, just laying out the context of where I was, and we started talking to developers, and Mark Cerny, who's the chief architect and of hardware and software architect, is also an avid gamer. So a lot of the questions we also not just asked about what should be in the technology, but what's already in PlayStation 3, for example, which we could change to help you make better games, etc. So, and one of that example I'll start with was we visited Quantic Dreams in France, and David Cage happened to be the person which we got access to talk about this secret project we are doing. And what do you see in PlayStation 3 which you do not want, or what you would want on PlayStation 4? And he came up, and I'm using this example because I just thought this is the most amazing thing he put. He said, I create my, I'm hoping, but show of hands, how many of you have played Quantic Dream games like Heavy Rain? And so fair few of you, right? So what they do, as you've seen very well, they create this amazing world which just gets you, it's cinematic, and you get into that world. And so David goes, and I'm just paraphrasing, I create this amazing world, and you kill it by saying, ping, I've got a trophy. And you don't go to a cinema and like Indiana Jones, and 15 minutes later, congratulations, you've sat in your seat for 15 seconds, you've got a trophy, or other media, such or so. And he said, so I don't want a system which takes over. I want to create my universe and stay in my universe with my players, and then you guys can take over. And unfortunately, and I personally, by the way, I think trophies are an amazing thing, and it's fantastic that they're integrated and they should be in games or so. But he worked around, and this is where I'm planting my questions, and I'm curious as you are on what my wonderful panelists will come across on the tech constraints which are set. And this is, in this case, it's a software tech constraint, but I would love my panelists to pick either hardware or tech in either case. But they worked it around in a very beautiful way. So those who have played the game, what that team did was everything was divided into chapters. So when you finish a level, chapter 1 ends, you get a black screen for about, I think, almost half a second or so, and then all your trophies appear. Ding, 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 ding. And so if you play this, you could just see such a beautiful, simple thing, which means you stay in their universe, throws you out in the system to get your trophies, and then chapter 2 begins. And that's got me inspired into this, the name of the session itself. And I'm going to start with you, Jack. And I would love any anecdotal, but either games you've worked on or games you like, and how they've got around either hardware or software, your choice, and how they designed around that.
Yeah, so this isn't anything I worked on, but I saw this and it blew my mind when I found out. So when BioWare were making Dragon Age Inquisition,
yep,
using Frostbite, which I think is a fairly rough engine to work with if it's not used for this kind of case that it was built for. Obviously, they had you could get a horse, like a mount, and you could be like, okay, I'm going to sprint across this amazing open world. But their engine couldn't handle the speed of moving it. It couldn't render the actual game world in time.
Yeah.
So when you're sprinting on a horse in Dragon Age Inquisition, you're actually not moving any faster than the standard gallop. All they're doing is just like widening the FOV of the camera, which makes you look like you're going, and they just add VFX speed lines. So you're going the exact same speed, but it just gives you this like sense of speed and inertia. And I thought that was like absolutely genius. And that's purely based on like the limitations of the console. And they just had to come up with a way to work around it. And they just played with the camera and chuck some VFX on it, and no one knew.
Yeah.
Like, look, and the only reason people know, like, it was like 2 years ago, and like the guy who like did it was like, yeah, no one knows this, but the secret's out. And you've just been like harboring this dirty secret for like 6 years.
And I always say, like, you know, video games are effectively, well, an illusion, and smokes and mirrors. And our smoke is fog is also a great way to make sure if the hardware's got not enough horsepower, then you just don't render those polygons by throwing fog in and stuff like that. I don't think we use probably mirrors, which are portals, right? And so you don't have to draw the entire world, and you put a portal, and you have to unfortunately go through this tiny bit of the cave, which has got nothing to do with the game, but he's taking you to that next world. And just because something is loading up, and so having faster SSD drives and everything are improving things, but I think there's still room to go on there where we'll have seamless gaming. Charlie, let's hear your...
Yeah, it's a good example. Yeah, it reminded me of one where I remember there's a game that came out where there's a button you could press to make your, I won't say what it is, but there's a button you could press to make your troops fight better. And it didn't do anything at all, but you just press the button and you think it did. But my example was about a decade ago, just over a decade ago, I was working on a multiplayer console shooter. And essentially all we could do is we could, when the game started up, I'm not technical, by the way, so I don't know if I'm quite the right person, but when the game started up, we could read data, we could upload a little bit from the server, but if we needed to make big changes back then, we had to do a title update, and title updates were very expensive, you know, they cost tens of thousands of pounds, took you a long time, you know, and you were really constrained with how many you could do. So one of my tech designers created what we call was a background script. So it was a really tiny, lightweight script we could upload when the game started, and we could use that to just do any quick patches that we needed to do at that time, which saved us so much hassle. You know, if an asset was causing a crash or there was an issue in a level, we could turn it off. And so we could just make these tiny little changes all of the time, and then just and then when we got to do a TU, we could incorporate them all into the actual process. And that was the best bit of tech one of the best, most useful bits of tech I've ever worked with, I think.
Fantastic. And would you say, I mean, you as a designer had that influence to create that bit of the tech, or was that engineers just saying, we know this is a limitation, we're going to create this for you?
Yeah. We knew there was going to be a limitation, and we knew, well, when you make live software, right, you've got to expect the unexpected, you know, we knew we were going to have to be agile and quick, and we knew that the old title update system wasn't going to allow us to do that. So yes, we created this system. Yeah.
Good. Simon.
So on the Division 1, we created a DLC called The Underground, which was procedurally generated dungeons. We only had about 6 months to do it because we were the first DLC releasing for the project. And Division's 4-player co-op cover shooter. And we wanted to do live pure random generation on the console. But the problem is you needed to do it on the server as well. And we needed to know it was going to be the same between the server and the console. And also, so we were thinking, right, we'll generate it on the server, get everyone to download it, and then they'll play the downloaded version. But that was going to take a lot of time on the server, a lot of time, like if someone's got poor bandwidth, you can't start the session. We ended up just making a new map and generating 200 or so dungeons within it, so that they were all pre-created, and that actually let us do a full QA pass. And we had a black listing, white listing system, so QA would go through the build regularly and blacklist any dungeons that weren't playable and whitelist the ones that they had approved, so that we knew that come release day there were 16 or 17 dungeons the players would never see. And as we were live, we could actually turn off dungeons when we knew bugs were turning up. What it really focused on was it made us think, well, if we only have 200, we've got to put more randomization in the actual playtime rather than the generation. And I think we got way more variation because of generating fewer instances than we might have otherwise. It really forced us to go hardcore on the how do we make it feel unique every time when it's not.
And what sort of stage would you say in terms of that development, where was it a design stage right at the beginning you realized that that's going to be an issue, or was it almost
So that was
deep in the cycle?
like almost in the first month when we were, so Reflections was a partner studio. It was being driven by Ubisoft Massive in Sweden. And so we kind of gave them we think we'd like to do this pitch, a technical pitch. And they kind of came back and said, we think these are the problems you'll have. And we looked at it and we said, you're right. And that's probably 18 months, 2 years work to solve it properly. So fortunately, we made the decision early enough that we could actually plan the project around it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Actually, there's so many questions I would ask in terms of development. Like, would you? Yeah, it'll come across more in terms of is it a good practice to fail fast and identify fast? Let's keep moving because fortunately, we only get 45 minutes and it's already like half an hour in. And yes, I'll finish with you.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to play with this a little bit and kind of shout out some of the iconic moments that have come out of tech constraints. So you mentioned earlier kind of around fog, right?
Yeah.
Silent Hill. Right, they didn't have the power to like increase the draw distance to what they wanted, so they put all this fog in so that you couldn't see the buildings popping in and out, and instead created the most iconic atmospheric moment of the game. Obviously, Space Invaders as well. The fact that when there are loads and loads of sprites on screen, it renders more slowly, and the more you pick them off, the more they start to move more quickly, and accidentally introduced progression back there. You've got another one in Metal Gear Stealth as well. So again, another rendering part where they couldn't render enough bullets and sprites on the screen to have like this full-on combat that they wanted. So instead, the entire game shifted to being around like the stealth mechanics that we all know and love today. And it was all through these constraints that, you know, these iconic games and so many of our things kind of came from it. So one other story that I wanted to share was from a hardware constraint that I experienced at uni, and this is just a fun little anecdotal story to finish on. So when we were at university, we were making games, as always, but we couldn't have access to source control because of how the university's like network setup was. And so we were working inside Unreal Engine. We were building out these games, as you know, without source control. It's a little bit like, oof. And one of the issues we kept having was we kept all putting stuff into the level and then keep like overwriting each other's work. It was not great. And we spent hours trying to work with the IT technicians to try and get source control working. So we had like single checkout. Couldn't get it to work. And instead, we ended up with our solution, which was the magical level goat. Now, the magical level goat was a goat, funnily enough, that looked quite magical, and was an actual toy figurine of a goat. If you had that, you were allowed to work in the level. You could save that level. If you didn't have that, and you were working on the level, well, so be it, your work was probably likely to be destroyed. And we just passed that around our team as we needed to. And it was just one of those moments of like, sometimes I think you were mentioning like 18 months to 2 years to go and fix something correctly, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you need those quick fixes and you need those simple fixes instead. So yeah, we had the iconic magical level goat, which got us through our project, and it all went well.
Cool.
You don't know where to go from that, do you?
The easiest way to go is to make this more general now, and I'd love to hear some good practices. And equally, you know, it's all, when something is bad, it's good to hear that that's not how you do things. Especially, I love talks when they're postmortems because they are the most useful. I hate a talk where everything went right and we made the best game ever and it sold millions and then it died or whatever. So can we, and this time you're going to start shouting in rather than me picking individuals. So can we start with some bad practices, and then we go with, I think easy. I'm hoping good practices is easier. So who wants to give it a go?
Well, I think not quite a practice, but I think just closed mindset working can be a real problem, because if you see a constraint, it becomes a problem that you cannot change. Whereas if you're an open mindset, you might adapt the thing you're doing around the mindset, around the issue. And I think always being open to new possibilities and new ways of looking at the issue, rather than just being like, I can't do this. You'll never get anywhere if you're closed mindset.
I've got like two kind of things on that as well. Of like, I think in my experience of when I was first off as a junior, I think there was a bit of a habit that design would kind of gatekeep like creative decisions, and you know, what they say goes and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, the book does need to stop somewhere with like a creative director or, you know, game director or something like that. But in my experience, getting people in, no matter what discipline they work in, and like actually getting their opinion on it and feeding that in, has always been useful for me. Like, I don't care if you're an animator and the issue you're trying to solve is a level design issue. Like, a good idea can come from anywhere. And my ass has been saved so many times by someone being like, just do that. And it's like, oh, shit, that's so obvious. And I was so in the trenches, I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it as well, I think it's like really important that everyone in here has probably got the best game idea in the world, right? But it doesn't matter until you actually get something in engine and you start playing it, and then that's when the good ideas start happening. Like, you can have a cool design document. It's like, cool. You mentioned before as well, like you were handed like a design document and you were just working on a thing. It's like, cool. But then that document, it's out of date within like 2 days because you've done the block out of the level, and it's like, it doesn't work. Like, it's great in top down, but we put the new enemy type in that's just been prototyped, and now everything's completely broken. So I would really stress that, you know, if you've got a cool game idea, a cool level idea, mechanic, like, get it in, test it, and really start pushing it, because that's when all the magic starts to happen. And that's always been, you know, something I learned as a junior, but like, I think that's something that's always really benefited me, no matter what role I've been in.
Yeah, I think it's about understanding your constraints as early as you can and just making sure they're communicated very widely. So I remember on Max Payne 3, we had a perk that would allow players to see silhouettes of all the enemy teams, right? And they go on for 30 seconds, you can see their silhouettes. And that's great, worked really well. And then as we were optimizing the game, we load the build up and all of our silhouettes are T-posing. The coders had culled the animations on distance at this point, which was a big shock a couple of weeks before we shipped. So we had to swap the silhouettes to icons, right? So we found the solution and we were forced to. But I do think it's about, I think it's about knowing the constraints, making sure everyone's aware of how you're using them, what you're doing. And I also think it's also obviously really, this is really obvious, right? But it's establishing really clear ways of tracking those constraints as well. So I made Manhunt 2, right? And for lots of reasons, that was a very difficult project, and I won't go into it, but we had to know exactly what was in that game, and it was really hard to understand because there was some content that was dropped into the level by the level designers, and there was some content that was put in by the scripters, right? So it's very hard to understand actually what content was in the game, and this was shortly after Hot Coffee, so it's very important that we understood that. So on my next game, which was a Midnight Club game, we insisted on a tool which we called the data miner, which we could run on the game. It would tell us exactly what asset was in every level. And so when we came to squeeze it onto a PSP, we could say, right, we need to get rid of this asset. It's not fitting. So we could just run the data miner, find out where that asset appeared in every level, and just go to them quickly and know that we've removed it. So I think it's good tool, knowing your constraints and good tooling, I think, is valuable. Oh, and also treat your tech designers and artists like royalty. They will save your bacon all of the time.
Good job.
I'm going to build on that as well. It's kind of around assumptions. Like, don't make assumptions about like what the potential solution or what is actually a constraint. There's been so many times that I've gone up to people and gone, oh, okay, you know, I know that this is going to be really tough. And then they turn around and go, no, it's not. And they're like, and I'm like, oh, it's not? And they're like, no, you can have that. I'm like, sweet. Yay. But it's around like, okay, I should just go and ask people. Like, let's not make those assumptions myself about what is difficult or what isn't difficult, especially in areas that I don't like work in day to day. So making sure that you actually just go out and talk to people and ask them. And like you say, great ideas and great solutions can come from anywhere. So put it out to the team, see what their solutions are.
Totally. So one thing, all of you are working for large corporations or owned by large corporations. So I'm assuming, and which was my experience, every company I've worked with, there's an in-house QA, because you keep re-emphasizing that, make sure people are playing the game from the beginning and failing fast in that sense or so. And I'm assuming not every single person in our audience is working for the Microsofts and Nintendos and the Sonys and the 2Ks and the Segas of the world. But what would you suggest to indie developers? How do they do the similar, apart from obviously playing themselves, because that comes along with they can't see the bigger picture of things because they're too involved in everything. Any suggestions for somebody who can't afford an in-house QA?
I think
It's open for anybody, but like, yeah.
I think making use of friends as playtesters, it's not QA, but I think getting outside opinion on a project is super valuable. Just to what you think is cool doesn't necessarily translate to other people's cool, but you've got to mitigate that against, you know, if it's not the target audience and they don't think it's cool, maybe that's fine, right? But I think in terms of testing, we developed at Ubisoft a thing for like getting AI to play the level and walk through and follow the objectives, and that's a lot of work. But if you can do anything with automated testing, whether it's test cases in your code, test cases in Blueprint, I know that Unreal's got a system for that. Anything you can do to offset time having to do that yourself will be a win in the long run, and it will tell you you've broken something before you notice.
That's great. And time flies. We're already 40 minutes in, so I'm assuming we've only got another 5 minutes left. It always is the case. Things move so far. I want audience to not ask a question, but plant a next discussion item for the next 4 minutes, because I do also want to end with a bit more stuff at that. So anybody got a discussion item we can discuss for the next 3-4 minutes? The mic is there, and unfortunately, we'll only be able to do one. So, yeah. And we need to have the mic on as well.
Test. Sorry. Hi, thank you. This is really interesting. At our studio, we are mostly independent. We spend a lot of time in our design department and cross-disciplinary as well, talking about how we want to find new workflows and processes to make things easier, make working with technical constraints easier in the future, but we're always very conscious about doing that on project with resource and financial limitations. Is there any advice you can give for how to balance those two things?
So I don't have any advice because I've fallen into exactly that same trap before. We spent a lot of money on the company I was at making some lovely tools, which nobody was paying for because they were only paying for the game. And it's interesting how that, just bringing this back to this discussion, we kind of lost all tech constraints because the tooling was so good, and we ended up putting so much in the game. It was far too much to QA and test. And so I think the constraint the only constraint I want to talk about there is really, it's like purity of intent, clarity of intent and discipline. But yeah, I don't have a good answer for your balancing the tooling and the processes with actually making a product. It's really hard. Yeah, it's a really hard question. I don't know if, yeah.
Like from my point of view, where we're thinking about, you know, franchises and always thinking about the game after the one you're releasing, it's really easy to get sucked into that. If I do it like this, it's going to be a system that's going to last the ages. The thing is, it's not. It's going to last 1, maybe 2 releases, and then you're going to want to refactor it and change it anyway. And the more time you spend over engineering a thing, the less value you will actually get out of using it, because the quicker you get it out into people's hands to actually use it, that's actually more value than making it all singing or dancing.
Should we end it, given the time constraint, which is another constraint? Okay. Let's end it there, and I'm sorry, but all 4 of you are going to be around next 15 minutes after this talk, right?
Yeah.
Sure. They'll have to prepare the room for the next talk, so they'll be moving out, but please ask the question there. But I'm going to spend my last minute, as I promised. We want to see if we can redesign a new, what the next console is going to be. And although my eyes will be able to track the panelists here, but you guys can take part as well. It's a very simple way to interact on this. I'm just going to go down the list of obvious things which are already here and things to come, and you just put up your hand that's what you want in your next games console, games system, whatever else. So, and leave your hand down if you think it's yeah, gimmicky or whatever else. So you'll see where it goes. And I'm hoping there's some obvious ones where it'll be crazy if somebody really, really wants. And jumping to that punchline, there's smell-o-vision in there. So if somebody raises their hand, they have a lot to answer for why. But let's get this started. So this is hopefully the next 30 seconds, and it'll be very, very quick. No justification required whatsoever. Every single opinion on this will be your personal opinion, as opposed to you redesigning the next PlayStation or your next Xbox. So, right, okay. Controller, physical input.
Yeah.
Okay, great. You see how this is going, right? Force feedback. This again, it could be obvious. Haptic feedback. Mini display on a controller. Oh, okay, this one good. This one. A hologram on your controller. There you go.
Always one.
R2D2, right? And okay, so I need to keep a track of where I was and like that. Game pads. So, keyboard and mouse. Joysticks. Flight sim fans.
Yeah.
Gloves. As in proper haptic gloves, right? Yeah. Oh, there's a few people on there. Bodysuits.
Depends on the project. but yeah, I think that could be cool.
Or could be cool in another industry, which feels
different.
Yeah, let's not go there. Okay. Okay, good. It's like moving on to visuals. Okay, photorealism. Yeah, I mean, we're sort of getting there already anyway. And so we'll see where this is heading to. VR, AR, XR, which is a sort of a combo of, yep, okay, good. Cloud gaming. Good. Okay, I'd love if whoever raises their hand, I'm going to come and find you afterward. Smell-o-vision. Why would you want deliberately want the smell of death in your house? You love good smell. I wasn't going to say we are not going to explain, but that's the reason. Like, people love good smells in the house, but you wouldn't want something which is, like, and most of the games is all about, if it's a shooter or a killer or whatever, you're killing somebody, then you should smell dead carcass, right? Or blood and stuff. Anyway. Let's have a talk about why smell-o-vision, because I'm sure you must be a real good case. Generative AI.
I think so.
Yeah. Just okay. So will generative AI take over your jobs? Yes, no, yes, no.
No.
I hope not.
Hope not.
I hope it doesn't take over my job.
I think they'll help us make more, but I don't think it'll take us over our jobs.
Yeah,
exactly.
You still need something to train it.
By the way, if anybody doesn't know generative AI, it's your chat GPTs and whatever the big topics right now they are. Blockchain. Okay. NFTs. Okay. That we're very predictable. A lot of what's a thing. And the very, very last one, we're going to end here. Brain implant.
Ooh.
You wouldn't need a device at all.
Yeah,
It'd be-
brain implant.
Yes.
Yeah. You're asleep and you finish levels and you wake up and you go to work. That's how it's going to be. I'm going to end it in there. Thank you very, very, very much, my panelists. Thank you very much. And a round of applause for this wonderful designers.